You can find this PowerPoint presentation and the accompanying essay if you follow the links below. Here we examine the link between taste and feelings of superiority that emerged in the 18th century. The importance of taste as an indicator of social status had already become apparent in the 17th century. It is exemplified in the court of Louis XIV. In the 18th century, the British sensed their superiority in the growth of the empire, while the Grand Tour epitomizes the rite of passage for the wealthy. The wealthy have their status reified in the portraits painted of them by Italian artists. The concept of the aesthetic first made its appearance in English in the 18th century. It is, however, difficult to give an exact definition to this concept, since it draws its meaning from Enlightenment philosophy and includes such concepts such as beauty, the sublime, harmony, and taste. Here I will focus mainly on the question of taste, as the idea of having good taste immediately summons up ideas of social status in a way that other concepts of the aesthetic, beauty, the sublime, harmony, etc., do not. Taste had long been part of the dominion of the wealthy. In the 17th century, Louis XIV had invested excessively in fashionable appearance. The construction of Versailles and its ornamental gardens were designed to keep the nobility under control, as nobles were obliged to stay there and follow Louis's constant display of fashion, dance, etc. To be anybody, you had to be seen by the king, and to be seen you had to follow the fashion. In Louis XIV's presence at Versailles and Fontainebleau, men had to wear the elaborate silk or velvet coat known as the habit habillé, which was often covered in jewellery and embroidery. In the presence of the king, women wore the even more elaborate grand habit de corps. Such open displays characterized taste, the sense that some were superior to others and that only men and women of superior breeding could have taste. Taste was not to be hidden in the civilized world, it was to be displayed as a mark of superiority. Two figures generally dominate the debate on taste in the 18th century, Addison and Shaftesbury. Their theories coincide to some extent with the two dominant opposing theories on the acquisition of knowledge, empiricism and rationalism. For Addison, the pleasures of taste are pleasures of the imagination. He defined taste in writing as that faculty of the soul which discerns the beauties of an author with pleasure and the imperfections with dislike. So the observer is gifted with the ability to discern a quality such as beauty, which exists in the natural world. It comes to us, as the empiricists would argue, via the senses. In Shaftesbury, we find some rationalist thinking. The mind alone creates beauty. He argues that beauty and good are the same. The aesthetic is therefore intertwined with the moral. Beauty is in the soul, so, as with Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray, the appearance of beauty is not proof of its existence. Feelings of superiority had been stoked up by the conquest of the New World. In the 16th and 17th centuries, missionaries and colonial administrators had discovered naked Indians, infanticide, cannibalism, human sacrifice, and promiscuity. Believing the Indians to be in a state of sin, the missionaries wanted to convert them to Christianity. This was the beginning of ethnology. The prevailing belief was that the civilized world was superior to that of the barbarians. This belief gave rise to anthropological theories which attempted to legitimate it by giving it a scientific foundation. One such anthropologist was Carl Linnaeus, who was the first to classify people into different races. To the 10th edition of his Systema Naturae, he added handwritten notes which classified the behavior of Europeans as light, wise, and inventive, while the African species is sly, sluggish, and neglectful. The notion that certain human beings were superior to others was given a scientific foundation, which would have terrifying consequences, notably with eugenics and Nazism in the 20th century. For Shaftesbury, civilized man had to make an effort to show that he was superior. Taste was not something that the ignorant or the socially inferior could appreciate, but the socially superior had an obligation to make sure they developed it and flaunted it. So much depends on true taste with regard to eloquence and even morality, that no one can be properly styled a gentleman who does not take every opportunity to enrich his own capacity and settle the elements of taste which he may improve at leisure. The Grand Tour offered an opportunity for those socially superior beings to show that they deserved their status as they soaked up the cultural knowledge that was available to them. During the 17th and 18th centuries, it was a kind of rite of passage for the wealthy, and those embarking on it were necessarily from the privileged social classes. Ostensibly, it served to complete the education of the men, or in some cases women, of the nobility, but it was also a statement of privilege and taste. The idea is aptly summed up by Samuel Johnson, as reported by James Boswell. A man who has not been in Italy is always conscious of an inferiority from his not having seen what it is expected a man should see. Almost all that sets us above savages has come to us from the shores of the Mediterranean. Many of the portraits painted of the Grand Tour travellers would show the tourist next to significant historical monuments or even dressed in classical garments. Such images allowed the tourist to identify themselves with former dominant civilizations by stressing the continuity between former great civilizations and their own. This was elitism in one of its purest forms, where the tourist appears to have a right to use his surroundings to show off his status. An example of this is Bertoni's portrayal of Sir Sampson Gideon, who became Baron Yardley and an unidentified companion. The trappings of civilization and high social status are patently obvious. The clothes, the bust of the Minerva Justiniani, the letter and the portrait miniature, and even the dog adulating its master. The seat in Gideon exudes authority and social superiority. So the nobleman, by long travelling, having enlightened his understanding with fine notions, comes home like a glorious sun, and doth not only shine bright in the firmament of his country, the Parliament House, but also blesseth his inferiors with the powerful influences of his knowing spirit.